So we talked about it. We know why you tune in. We know why you listen to us week after week. It's not because we talk about your teams. It's not because we talk about our fantasy league. It's not because we share our opinions. It's because you want us to talk about the Oscars. So we're going to do that. You're welcome, everybody. It's RJ and Mike. We're back. RJ, did you watch the Oscars on Sunday?
I didn't, but I caught enough of the headlines, so I know what's going on.
Yeah, I watched anything else but the Oscars. So, again, when I woke up to a bunch of text messages of, "Oh my God, did you see what happened?" So, congratulations, guys! You got the viewership up you wanted, and I don't know if there's a place to bet on host for next year, but I bet Chris Rock has been taken off the board because he's such the overwhelming favorite at this point.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But, anyways, um, much like the Oscars tried to one up some of the other news in the sporting world with some of the shenanigans they got into. We've one up the Oscars by releasing our first 1.0 mock drafts. Your favorite Kuiper and McShay. We won't talk about who's who. I mean, obviously, one of us is younger and better looking. One of us is a little bit more experienced with a little bit more gray in his hair. Um, but again, 1.0 of our respective mocks came out today. RJ beat me to the punch for sure. But we'll go through some of the things we liked, some of the things that were head scratchers from that, and kind of what we think could move in the next month or so before the draft actually happens and our draft starts. And after that, we'll get into the stuff that everyone's tuning in for. Like I said, the Oscars. We'll talk about some award winners, some award losers, and a couple folks that we'd like to walk up on stage and give a little smack to based off of some of the trade offers that they sent us. So again, if you're watching and want to jump on, by all means, as usual. But we'll get into it. So, RJ, you're really going Malik Willis number one? I don't know, buddy.
Yeah, I I don't know. Uh, Willis, I like your mock with me taking Brees Hall also. Um, it's gonna be landing spot dependent, but I have a huge need at running back, so I certainly can see it. Um, I don't think you step outside of like the top two quarterbacks or Hall, especially like with the 101, just because I think there's a chance that you just lose that value.
No. And again, I had you with Hall because you don't draft for need, especially in a league like this. You just don't do it because you're never gonna. There's enough training partners that you're usually able to get what you need if you take the value and then move it. But the second part is if you reach and you miss it, it's bad. So that being said, I will use need as a tiebreaker. So I think Willis has enough questions for me. I think the arm talent's there. I think the highlights are there. I think the ability is there. The fact that he was doing it at Liberty and not a larger school, I think, is a question for sure. But Hall, I think, just is a safer floor and still with enough ceiling, and also fills a bigger position of need for you. I think Tannehill gives you what you need. I don't think he's in danger of losing his job. And with AJ Brown, Robert Woods, and potentially another receiver in the draft, that's a pretty nice spot to be in. So, if all things being equal between Hall and Willis in kind of that top tier for you, I broke the tie towards you taking more of the need than the want.
I can agree with that. I think this class is a little bit closer to that 2018 class where there is uh, nobody's a Saquon Barkley or anywhere
Mm.
close. But there is one running back that is just even in super flex, like higher than even the quarterbacks um, before before landing spot. I think if somebody comes up to the 101 or the 102 in the actual NFL draft and takes Willis, then there's a discussion for him being super valuable. Expected to start in year one. Other than that, if everything kind of stays like no real big moves, and like we see both of the quarterbacks or the three quarterbacks in like mid to late first round landing spots, then I think if Hall goes to like a Buffalo or something that's like where they need a running back, I think he's the clear cut number one in this draft.
No, I think it could be really interesting if someone decides to try and move up to get him, with the prices kind of in that 2 through 5 range. Because what's kind of being put out there is that both New York teams are being aggressive and trying to move down and acquire additional capital. So if they're trying to move, and you're saying Detroit, and you're saying, hey, if I miss out on Hutchinson, I kind of don't care. I'm kind of happy with any of 4 guys in this range. Um, do you move down to like 8 or something like that, knowing that you've got Goff as a bridge, or do they shock everyone and take Willis at 2? Again, it's a lot of, like you said, landing spot dependent on what that means in terms of his ability to start. But um, I again, if you're choosing between the top 2, it makes sense. But then we both agree that the Lions are taking a quarterback. I think it's Willis. You think it's going to be Pickett because Willis is gone. I don't know if I would take Pickett that high. I have questions. Hand size matters to me, because the last person who got mocked with terribly small hands was Jared Goff. Now, I think Burrow made a joke of it a couple years ago, but I think his hands were a good bit larger than Pickett's. So
Yeah.
it is something I am worried about, especially with a lot of the QB needing teams in the range that I think he'd go, being cold weather teams, especially potentially a Pittsburgh rematch. I could see being really tough for him. But again, it's a question of, if you're a building team like Detroit is, and Willis is gone, do you take Hall, like you mentioned, because you think you can trade him down the line? Do you take Pickett, think he's going to develop it? Because, what do we know? It's a real big question in terms of talent, opportunity, and fitting your team makeup at the time.
So, well, like with the Lions, I think it's a weird situation. Like if let's say there's one quarterback that has a desirable landing spot. The rest all fall into a spot where they have somebody starting already, where they are the future. They have a bridge quarterback already. And Lions is in that situation where the like Malik Willis or whoever it may be is off the board. Then I sure I think you think about the running back one, but I think just due to longevity, I think there's also a discussion for whoever the wide receiver one is.
That's also
Um,
true.
I don't know if I even necessarily go like wide receiver one as much as I go like the wide receiver with upside. So like a Drake London, who everybody keeps comparing as like the potential is like the DK Metcalf of this draft.
Or Mike Evans, yeah.
Right. Um, I think you just that's the one spot where like there's such a need at like every spot on offense. I think you just like you're going to be in a very similar situation the next year anyway, regardless if you take a quarterback or running back, whatever it may be. If you're not getting a quarterback, I think you just take the best like BPA of the player with the longest career.
Right. Yep. Cool. So moving to 3, we both again agree that the Giants are taking a running back. You have Hall still here. I have Walker, because Hall is gone for me. Um, I don't know. You mentioned the 2018 class, which again was pretty good in some areas, not so great in other areas. One area that I'm kind of reminded of with this running back class is less about like a 2018 class. It kind of reminds me of last year's class, where there's a prospect that everyone's losing their mind over and has been for a long time. Again, Najee Harris, when he was a freshman at Alabama, everyone's like, "Oh my God, this is the Harris you want." Not Damien, you want Najee, and then performed well enough that everyone knew coming out that, okay, Najee's probably the 101 and definitely the RB1 and stuff like that. But then you had this other guy, Javonte Williams, who was like, this guy's pretty good. Broke a lot of tackles at North Carolina, was in a split backfield with Carter, but, he's got a lot of promise. Walker reminds me a little bit of Javonte Williams. Not necessarily in any given aspect, but can break tackles, can find the seams, has enough speed to break through, and probably more speed than it. Not exactly the same kind of runner, but I don't know. Just parts of his game remind me when I'm looking at tape of Javonte Williams. So I think that's the player I'm swinging for here. Is probably outside of your top three. But considering, in my perspective, there's two top running backs in this class, and there's a step. I would say break ties in terms of need. Getting a second running back next to Christian McCaffrey is probably a priority versus picking a rookie receiver who is going to take a couple of years when you've got a pretty decent productive core as it stands.
Yeah. So I would have, when you look at Giants, your initial thought is like, for a pick this early is you probably want a wide receiver. But like you just mentioned, it may take a year or two for that wide receiver to catch on. So I think Giants does opt into the more productive option of the second best running back in this class. Um, I think there is a pretty substantial gap between uh, Walker and the rest of the running back class, especially if you're looking for somebody that has the potential of being a bell cow in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't get me wrong, bell cows kind of extinct at this point. We see maybe 8 of them a year that are like true bell cows. So, and I don't know if any of the guys in this draft class are worthy of being that type of 30 plus touches a game. But if there was one that, if there were some that were going to break out, it would be Walker and Hall. And Walker has the proven track record of being a bell cow. You know, like especially in college, he got a lot of touches. He's a fantastic running back.
Yep. All right. Well, we agree on who the next three players are off the board because we've already talked about Walker. So, in some order, the three receivers, London, Burks, and Wilson. I have it going London, Burks, Wilson. You have it going Burks, London, Wilson with Walker in there in between. But again, those three kind of going in close succession as probably the top tier of receivers. Again, we've all heard the Mike Evans or DK Metcalf comp for London. I've heard Wilson compared to everybody from Justin Jefferson to Stephon Diggs, all these kind of guys. And then Burks is apparently the shoe-in, absolute, no questions asked, A.J. Brown clone. So, RJ, of those three guys and the comps you're hearing towards them, which one do you think is the most likely and the least likely to hit that ceiling?
Is it most likely? Probably Wilson. I view Wilson as like the safer of the three. Keep using the 2018 class as like a great reference point, but I kind of view Wilson as that as the Cortland Sutton of like this draft, where he was viewed as just NFL ready, safe, like expected to be a producer. So I like Wilson for that. Burks and London I just see as like high upside. Complete, wouldn't say completely different players, but both fantastic upside.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily see that like big game Mike Evans type of player from London, but I don't think it's an unreasonable comp.
No, I mean, I think that's a fair thing. Playing style is different between Wilson and Sutton, but kind of the Debbie Darling. He was a 5-star receiver coming out. I think wide receiver 1 in his class. I know a little more about him because he went to Ohio State. But again, that pedigree people have been tracking for a while. London had similar hype, and then Burks really came on when you look at the size, speed, and the move toward the bigger physical wide receiver. And the yak monsters that are all the rage in the NFL right now. So I don't know. I'm torn. I think I think Wilson has the talent and probably the cleanest path towards superstardom, but in terms of how they win is so different that it's going to be a lot of a system fit for me. Like if London goes to a place that will throw it up to him, if he goes to, again, not Tampa, but with a kind of YOLO quarterback, like say he goes to the Jets, And it's a matter of, okay, Wilson's just going to toss it up to him and go get the 50-50 ball. That the Jets might actually be a good landing spot for a receiver, God forbid.
Yeah.
Wilson, I think, has a little bit more runway in terms of what makes him a good fit. Burks is probably the hardest to fit into the right system, but if he hits the right system, whew, wow, that's going to be a problem. So,
Yeah.
like that. And then, so apparently there's some folks who are a little dubious of the picks I'm off to myself. I go back-to-back DNs here in my mock draft. You give me one of them in Hutch, but then Wilson is the other because you had Pickett going early. So I want to know what you think. Are you dubious with my intent of going back-to-back DN, or do you believe that that I might deep down be serious about the two elite ends in this class?
I mean, I think you acknowledge the fact that both of them certainly could go in this range. Do I think you actually pull the trigger on both of them? No. Um, I think I think at some point you would probably consider like another wide receiver, potentially even Lloyd as a productive inside linebacker if he has a great landing spot. But that's kind of a stretch, just due to how much we're going to have to pay these guys. Um, I I can see it. I think it's a lot more realistic than everybody assumes. I don't know. Maybe everybody assumes it's realistic. I like it.
If you want to know if it's realistic, just let them fall to me, guys. If the draft goes this way, just see what happens. All right, fine. We'll keep going.
I mean, there's if anything outside of like the three, like the quarterbacks and running backs, like in the top 10 that are going to retain or gain like substantial value, it's going to be those two, right?
And that's my thought is if you look at the positions that people pay up for right now, it's quarterback, it's D end, it's receiver. Tight end is also one that, because of scarcity, ends up being relatively expensive also. So in my opinion, if I can grab a premium prospect at one of those four positions, a player that I feel is a top tier option, and I get him on a rookie contract for 4 years, yeah, it's defense. So absolutely, I'll double tap if I feel like that's that kind of player. And Thibodeau and Hutchinson are those kind of players for me. So some people think I might be, a heck of a poker player here. I'm not that good.
I
So
haven't I haven't had any of the picks in this range, so I don't necessarily know what the cap hit's going to be. Um, but I still think that falls into like the middle of like the pay range for defensive ends, so it's not unreasonable.
so 7 and 8 would be 4.4, and I don't know if Jeremy's done the adjustment. I don't think he has. It shouldn't be a major change just based off of the cap change last year. But the seventh pick is 4.4 million, eighth pick is 3.9 million, basically.
Oh, so that's actually fantastic.
Yeah. So if I look at that versus the current DN market,
Yeah,
um,
they're definitely going to go there.
the 32nd D end is 5.8 million.
Yep. So that is a fine pick for both, and I would everybody should be trying to get one of those picks away from you, so you don't end up with both defensive ends.
Well, again, we'll see what ends up happening. And again, maybe somebody goes DN before I do. I don't know. But I think that I'm still doing research. I reserve the right to change my mind, but based off of the stuff I've done so far, those premium DNs are looking pretty attractive to me right there. All right. Well, we've gone into a lot of detail on the early stuff here. Let's kind of pick and choose our way through this. You had Colts going quarterback. I had him going more of a position of need. I think we both had Corral as our third quarterback. What made you go that direction instead of, say, a Howell or a Ryder?
He
Sorry.
he seems to be um, the most likely third if he's not the second quarterback taken. Everybody seems to put him as the potentially the third first round quarterback. I don't know. I assumed it was more of a chalk assumption, and I was just going with that. I like him. I think he's good. I'm not overly impressed with him, but I think he certainly has a job in the league.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that. I think depending on what tape you watch, and I think that's probably a fair thing for most of these quarterbacks this year, is there's a game tape you can watch and you're like, holy shit, this guy's the best quarterback in the class. And there's another game tape, it's like, this guy's a day 2 pick. But I could see, especially with an Ole Miss pedigree and everything, like Eli and so many others in the league that have come through Ole Miss, that he's at least going to get a shot and a shot to start at some point. And likely that means that he's going to be a first round pick. Kind of jumping down here, I had Devin Lloyd as the first linebacker at 12. You had Nakobe Dean at 13 as the first linebacker. I'm interested by that because I think it, and again, I love Dean. I think he's going to be a fantastic pro. And the last time a player had his measurables in the draft was Micah Parsons last year. So for some reason, it seems like whether it be the media or otherwise, folks are kind of down on him as maybe a fringe first round pick. Do you think he still goes in the first? Or do you think he falls out?
I think he should go in the first. I do look at him very similar to Parsons. They are very capable inside linebackers, but if you just want to put them as an outside linebacker or even a defensive end, they'll thrive just as much. I so like with me, I think Lloyd and Dean are interchangeable. If you want to say that Lloyd goes 13, you want to like flip flop them 13, like 13 and 15. I see no difference. It's going to be preference on draft day. They're both fantastic linebackers, and they both are probably deserving of being a top 15 pick, regardless of where they fall, as long as it's not some terrible spot, obviously.
Yep. So the other thing I'm looking at here, and it comes back to the whole positional value conversation in our league, which I was a little surprised about. And again, something that I think we had the NFL version of this debate in chat a couple of days ago was if you look at Kyle Hamilton, everyone from the media seems to be putting him up there as he's a top 5 pick. He's not making it out of the top 10. He's that kind of player, that kind of talent, etc. Whereas from value of safety position, it's kind of like, well, people and teams don't value safeties like that anymore. So I had him staying in the first round, even though I think most folks would say the first round safety, you're out of your mind. You had him on the fringe of your first. What made you bump him out of the first round?
I don't think the value's there. He's not. He's the best safety in this draft, and he might be the best player in this draft, but I don't think he's on the level of like a Derwin James, somebody who was actually taken relatively early in the first round in our draft and like warranted it. He's a fantastic football player. I just don't see him being that type of a fantasy productive safety. Somebody that's going to get you 70 plus tackles, plus impact every statistical category on defense: sacks, interceptions, tackles for losses. He will provide some type of production, but like that's just he's probably more likely to get you 90 tackles and like an excessive amount of forced fumbles, and that's probably it. Which I don't hate that.
Right.
I just that's not going to give you a Logan Ryan type production or a Buda Baker type production as far as fantasy points. Is he
Right.
still going to be one of the more popular safeties in the league and sell a lot of jerseys? Yeah, but he's going to be that fringe 170, 180 point scorer, not the 250 point like stud safety. One of the few that deserve that like $10+ million contract in our league.
No, that's fair. So Sean, welcome. we were
That's good.
debating the first round. I'd say whether Kyle Hamilton belongs in the first round of our draft. Looking at some of the differences in our mocks, I had Hamilton in a mid to late first pick, whereas RJ had him falling to the second. I know obviously safety is not always the position you're going after in a draft like this from a scarcity standpoint, but if a player like this is potentially top 5, top 10 consideration, where do you fall in terms of him being a first round pick for a league like ours?
So for me, I know I've expressed my love for safeties before, but something like Hamilton, I would still put him in the second round. I think the first round picks are just way too valuable to be spending it on a position that is so easily rotated or easily replaced.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair. And again, I used it just because given the talent upside of it. And again, I've been known to make that mistake before, and I'll probably make the mistake again. Who knows? But just to kind of finish out the draft side of things, then Sean, we'll give you a chance to circle back in terms of which some of the thoughts you had on the box.
Sure, I'll be right back.
RJ, I'm going to ask you
a drink.
Yeah, RJ, I'm going to ask you to pick a pick from my first, and I'll pick a pick from your first that you think is, if it happens, just insane value for where the player's taken. So again, partially, hey, that'd be great to have that happen to you and fall to that spot, but you don't think it's going to happen. And then pick one of you're out of your mind. There's no way that player is going so high, and you can't pick Kyle Hamilton because we already talked about him. And I'm happy to go first since I just kind of hit you with this. I'm looking at your 29th pick, Trayvon Walker. And he's a bit of a late riser, it seems like. But it seems like most NFL circles are saying he's, if not a shoe-in DE3, like he is up there with Kayvon and Aiden as it's a top 3 D end, and he might be 1 or 2 in there. So if it's worth considering from a price tag perspective for me to say those 2 D ends at 7 and 8, getting the third one at 29 is just absurd value. And I'm going to tell you, if he's there at 121 and I still have to pick, he's not getting past me. So that's what I look at your mock and I see that's a heck of a steal, and it's going to Goose, which I hate even more.
So I love Trayvon Walker. My issue is he doesn't necessarily fall into that like edge outside linebacker. He falls into that like defensive end type of position where like if he goes into a 3-4 and he ends up being one of the defensive ends in that, MFL might just put him as a defensive tackle and he might just get screwed. And that is my only hesitation. Where like he could potentially just on draft day before we even see like when he's keyed into the system, he might just be a defensive tackle, and we may just have to hope that he gets like a position change. That's my only hesitation. I'd probably have him top 20, like top 18, because I think talent wise he's right up there with the other 2.
I think that's fair.
As far as
so Sean, what did you pick from either mock? What are you feeling is potential way too low for one of these players?
Ooh, let me pull up yours, Mike. But as far
as if you're still looking, I figured I'd give RJ more time, but if you need a second, that's fine.
Yeah, no. While I'm pulling it up, as far as Walker goes, you don't put a guy that runs a 4.5 at D tackle. That would be the least of my concerns, honestly.
No, that I mean that's fair. He's 6'5". If they tell him to put on 15 pounds, he's pushing close to 300, and then I don't think it's unreasonable. It's just if he's in a bad landing spot. That's
I just think with that speed, you don't tell him to put on 15 pounds. You move him to the edge, come hell or high water. But that's just my 2 cents. Alrighty, let's look at these drafts.
So while Sean's looking, RJ, why don't you go ahead?
18, Brian Robinson. I think that's going to be, if he's somewhere in that range, I think that's going to be a fantastic pick. He seemed to be I don't know, a pretty boring name pretty early in the draft process. But now he's slowly climbing up the boards. There's a couple other running backs that are doing the same thing, but if he gets a good landing spot where he can be probably not featured, but at least part of a rotation where he is one of the more talented backs, I think he has a potential of being pretty productive.
So looking at your drafts, maybe it's just me, but I think Kenny Pickett at 2. I think a couple things on that. I don't see you, RJ, taking Malik Willis at 101.
That's fair.
I know, honestly, looking at your roster, especially, see you taking Breece Hall, and then Malik Willis goes to 2, and then I think after Malik Willis goes at 2, I think Kenny Pickett drops maybe 8 spots or so. I think 2 is very high. And if I were the Lions, if Malik Willis does go 101, I take Breece Hall 102 and just accept that I just got the steal of the draft at 102.
I mean, it depends on where he goes.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not a Pickett fan. I've never been a Pickett fan.
I think he's going to be a fumble machine in the NFL. But I just think he, like, if he falls to a certain spot in like the actual NFL draft, then he will be assumed as like a safe starter.
Yeah. Well, I see him as your Dwayne Haskins 2.0. He's going to end up falling. People are going to think he's a steal where he does get picked, and then he's going to do jack shit for the rest of his career.
That's fair.
Whoa! What is this language? Come on now, guys.
I don't disagree with that, but I also I do think that there's a possibility that coming out of the draft, he has some hype.
All right. So besides that, since you've already stolen that, thanks so much. In terms of another player, I think that is probably a little bit higher than he belongs. I would say the problem is that so many of your picks are very close to mine. I go with Dameon Pierce, 28 to the Dolphins.
Okay.
I like Pierce, but I think he's about 2 or 3 running backs higher in the pecking order than I have him. Again, I think once we get past that top 2 or maybe 3, if you're a big Spiller fan, then it's a little bit more of a dealer's choice, which do you like best of each of these players. But when I look at Dameon, he's kind of average across the board. Florida didn't really impress me a ton in terms of that system. So he just kind of screams day 3 running back to me. And that's not someone I'm taking a shot on in the first round. If I've got the defensive level of players as well as some of the wide receiver depth that we expect in this class.
Yep, I agree. But our draft always goes like 1 or 2 running backs too deep in the first round, and then it just doesn't make sense after that.
Yes.
So that was my what the hell running back, like where it honestly should have been one of the defensive players, one of the many defensive players that are on the not drafted list on mine that are like far more reasonable, like in the mid first, because right. I just think our draft reaches for wide receivers and running backs in the first round.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those where you talked about like Kenny Pickett earlier, some of these guys, like people are going to reach for some of these players that you hit the point of demarcation, and we talked about Hamilton probably not being a first round pick. But if you're the Dolphins and a team that's probably in the hunt for the playoffs this year, what makes more sense for shooting for a day 3 upside with a guy like Pierce, or taking a guy like Hamilton who may not be exactly what you need for that position, but it's probably a little bit safer there. So again, just another topic of conversation for more draft shows. But
Well,
there.
I will acknowledge there's typically a safety and a defensive tackle on the back end of the first that we're all like, that's awful value, but like the real life draft capital's there. So like I can see it. I just hate mocking those players in the first round. Like I don't think it's a good idea. Like is Ed Oliver worth a first round still?
No.
Probably
Well,
not.
and I think that's less because of the player. I think Ed Oliver is still a great player. He might be a Bills homer in me, but the Bills defensive line is a continuous just cycle of players throughout the entire game. So it's just not worth it.
I love Ed Oliver too, but like he's a good defensive tackle, and like good to above average aren't worth a first rounder.
No, that, and I mean the position he's in. As a Bills fan, they cycle out those players so much that none of them put up stats themselves. Combine them all together, and they put up some decent stats game over game, but there's no one standout.
Yep.
Have you guys talked about Desmond Ridder yet?
No.
Okay.
So please jump in on this one.
RJ, where's Desmond Ridder?
No,
really?
Nah.
I see his intangibles, and he ran. Oh gosh, let me pull it up. 4.5, in the 40, and he showed off his arm strength at his pro day. I see teams reaching for him and him being a starter. Probably next year.
You're talking about the guy that was only good because Alec Pierce. He was throwing to Alec Pierce, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nah.
No.
He had an above average wide receiver that propped him up.
I'm just surprised. I mean, with QBs and what they're worth in our league, I'm surprised you don't have them anywhere in your mock.
I think he's probably Ritter's probably the 5th quarterback. I think we both agree on Ridder being the 5th quarterback off. It's just Howell's going at 32 for him, so probably early 2nd, great value for him. But yeah, I agree. I have Ridder going at 25 for the Raiders. I think he's the exact kind of 2nd round quarterback in the NFL draft that someone's going to take a shot on.
Yep.
That he's going to push up into the late 1st in our draft.
Yeah, I feel the 2nd tier of quarterbacks that aren't one of the first 3. I think all of those guys in like the real NFL are at least have enough upside to where if somebody trades into the 31st or 32nd pick and takes them just so they get that 5th year option. I don't think that's unreasonable. But I was overzealous with the quarterbacks last year in my mock. So like I'm tempering expectations on how many quarterbacks are taken like this year. Because of the potential value of them being worth more than a first, I have like the better ones going top 2. But other than that, I kind of laid off drafting them super high.
Yeah, I think this offseason with quarterback swaps and real life trades and whatnot, I think people are really starting to realize the value of QB in our 32-person league as well.
I will tell you, if any of those any of those quarterbacks do drop to the 2nd round in ours and then end up being a starter in the NFL and they carry a 2nd round draft pick to them,
yep,
they're going to be worth a ridiculous value.
Yes, yeah. Not having to deal with the 5th year option, crazy value.
Yep. Well, the difference is, again, if there's a 2nd round pick in our league, and if there's, say, a 2nd round pick in the NFL, you got to keep them free from starting for the first 2 years, or else it doesn't matter. Because of the Jalen Hurts contract, I'll call it, now the policy is you have to be in the league for 2 years before you can get that extension. So not only would it have to be a second rounder in our league, but they would have to stay out of the starting spotlight for 2 years or enough so that their production wasn't enough to completely price them out of the market. Because if they come in and have a couple spot start games and they end up being QB 30, let me take a quick look in terms of what the 30th ranked QB is getting paid right now.
It's going to be a rookie contract QB, isn't it?
Okay, so it's Tua's contract right now. Yeah. So that's, again, it's good. It's good value. It's a lot cheaper than paying a third-year option. May or may not be by the time we get around to that point, but it's not necessarily the same value that, hey, I'm paying Jalen Hurts $1 million a year until he gets Wally pipped in Philadelphia.
Right. Yeah. Even if that second round pick ends up being a somewhat mediocre quarterback, it's probably a $15+ million contract on extension time.
Yep.
But looking at free agency, 15 is a steal.
Oh, yeah.
It's a discount compared to what you'd be paying for $40 million Tom Brady.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's enough mock draft talk. Let's get into the award section of the evening. Again, apologies that we're not all wearing our Sunday finest and tuxedos and cap and tails and all that kind of stuff. But you'll just have to imagine that we walked the red carpet. Everyone was flattered and amazingly dressed, and we're going to get ranked among the best dressed in the magazines tomorrow and all the morning shows and stuff like that. But kind of giving out a couple of awards here in terms of I'd say best, worst, and then folks we'd like to give a Will Smith to Chris Rock treatment to. So not necessarily in that order. I'll go ahead and give an example of that third one. So the statements that I think the Colts made towards me in terms of me sending offers to him at this point, I would say that's akin to the Will Smith getting up in his seat and smacking Chris Rock and saying, "Keep my wife's name out your mouth." Kind of the stop sending me trade offers, you shit. I don't like anything that you're sending my direction. So that would be an example, I would say, of the Chris Rock and Will Smith interaction. I'll also give a shout out to a couple of owners who have really stepped up, who I would say are nominees for probably best new owner. I think there might be a trader who you disagreed with, but the way Texans has turned his team into something that he wants to build with, and as he continues to form that as what he's taken forward, and then the Jags and the way that he's accumulated draft capital and broken down some of those pieces, I think are two nominees up there for best new owner. I think we can agree that the worst new owner is Goose, because if you were just going to take a year away and then come back, like, why leave in the first place? It's just a way to duck your commission responsibilities. You're better than that.
It's really his way just to get out of the NFC North.
Well, again, I can see why someone would want to do that, but this team wasn't exactly a slouch when he left. But those are some of the nominees I have for best, worst, and for the oh my God, Will Smith just smacked me in my face.
My best new owner would probably be Jets. Would be my nomination. He's made a lot of moves. He's really active. Responds to most trade offers. Yeah, I'm. Lions is up there. A horrible roster, but responds to trade offers. Has accumulated draft picks. Listens to the podcast. So
that's a very important thing that we should be weighing heavily in the voting. I'm sorry, I forgot that portion.
What's our worst? I don't want to put anybody as our worst owner.
Saints.
Our worst.
Saints.
All right.
Fair.
I second that.
All right, Goose, you avoid this one.
I think my worst, obviously, is Saints. I saw that he was online, and I missed him being online by probably 5 or 10 minutes. Sent him a number of offers, sent him an email, sent him a second email, and haven't seen or heard from him since. and don't expect to until probably after he gets auto picked in his draft. Um, so that is my worst, my best new owner, or just best owner overall.
Whatever. Again, we're doing superlatives here.
Best owner overall.
If you nominate yourself, I'm kicking you off the pod.
No, I gotta give it to the Giants. I really just still like that Josh Allen trade. I mean, even with Deshaun Watson was acquitted, or not acquitted. I'm sorry. They declined to press charges against them. Yada yada yada. Getting Josh Allen for what he got him for, I think is still just a steal. Then he's got Christian McCaffrey coming off of his 4-year hiatus with his injuries. And a bunch of young talent at wide receiver. So I love the way he's put his team together, and then Kittle at tight end. I think he's really going to be a contender, and if not this year, then next year, most definitely. I think he's done a great job. And my slap goes to Goose. Goose and I had a back and forth email for about 24 hours maybe, just essentially laying into each other after he sent me a very fun offer that I think you guys have seen it, which I responded to the offer with a LOL or something to that extent, and it spiraled from there. But I haven't gotten any offers since, so I think that was a win.
No, and I will admit I've had some bad behavior as well with Goose in terms of some of my responses and counter offers to some of the stuff that he sent over. So it's not the way I want to. Again, I'm having a Will Smith type of apology here. Not the way I want to react when folks are active and send offers my direction. But I'm still growing. I'm still a work in progress. So what can I say?
I stopped trying. So.
I don't get upset when people send terrible offers because I know I send some garbage offers. It's just part of the game.
And then looking at some of the comments in chat throughout the day, I think your best owner got nominated for a smack from Matt. So again, I'm sure there's some fun backstory there in terms of some interactions between Matt and his players and the Giants trying to move some of their roster around. Trying to see if there's anyone else that got brought up in chat as a smack owner. I don't know. Looks like the
Pats and Bears. Pats would like to, I guess, nominate Bears. Isn't fond of his trade negotiating tactics.
I'm still laughing at Pat's Cole Beasley contract that he somehow got away with because Browns decided to take on a $10 million Cole Beasley for nothing.
Something about that, like I look at it and I go, he's worth more than nothing.
No, he's not.
And then I look at that contract and I'm like, nope, I wouldn't take that.
He should have been sending him a fourth to get rid of that shit. That was, I don't know how Browns just looked at that and said, oh, okay, I'll take on $10 million for nothing.
Because if he ends up being a decent wide receiver, it's yet another decent wide receiver for him.
He's 34, 33. Yeah. And I mean, he's been on the decline with the Bills, and was asking for a trade, found no trade partners, and hasn't. I haven't seen a single news article since he was released. So that's just bad.
I don't know. I think the whole Vax stuff last year kind of put him on some blacklists. So we'll see if once camps start opening up, if he ends up getting a couple invites and latching on someplace. But it's a decent risk, and I think he's got the cap space, I guess, for it. But that being said, yeah, I'd rather have the $10 million than Cole Beasley at this point.
Yeah, I always look at those mediocre, productive players and imagine that they will probably find a landing spot sometime after training camp because they don't feel like going to it. Typically happens with a lot of defensive players. It's what Jadeveon Clowney's doing. It's what Gilmore's doing. They just don't have to do any training camp, and then they'll sign with whoever the best suitor is at that point.
Well, it helps that the salary cap is kind of fake too. So it seems like whenever teams need to find money, they find money to get these guys. So the free agency window is opened itself a little bit, and we'll see. Again, these may be folks, like you said, that it's closer to the draft or post-draft. I think Clowney, he wants to be healthy when he's interviewing for these to negotiate from a position of strength, which I understand, but it may be negotiating in a much smaller market. But either way, I think a lot of moves and dominoes still to fall. I saw a listing of still available free agents and some pretty good values out there still.
Hmm. Definitely.
All right. Well, 50 minutes talking about, a little bit of draft talk and then a little bit of Oscar talk. But, hopefully that's enough to tide you over. RJ and I will watch a few more award shows and have some more insights about the creative lighting and use of music in some of these films, and be able to debate that more hotly next time out. I don't know, even Sean might get into some directing. Who knows? All right.
Yeah, well, while I watch these award shows, everybody should send me good players for my 2022 picks.
101.
It's up there. Send me good players.
Well, I know it's up there. I just don't see you taking anything.
send good players. That's all I ask.
That's it. He's a very simple man. Just send him good players.